right, here we go. Here's the potential overturning of gay marriage. At least they're putting it back into the Supreme Court. We're gonna see for sure. But everyone's talking about it right now. So here's my thing, at least, which is gay marriage and religion don't mix super well. So the best thing the country can do is acknowledge both, but not force both of them to kind of accept each other, kind of in that way. So I'm fine with religious institutions not having gay marriage, but I'm fine with other institutions that do allow gay marriage, have that customer base to exist. And if they want, I'm also fine with federal places allowing marriages of all types because, the federal government doesn't really have to discriminate on that basis. That's basically my short answer to everything, which is religious freedom and I guess gay marriage would be like some sort of freedom of expression. So something like that. But it's not like one is above the other. It's like both of them are rights. So we gotta implement them in a way that neither of them are squandering the rights of the other person. So if you're religious and you're not, an extremist who's actively hurting people, it's fine for you to practice your religion and your religious beliefs. But if you're gay and, you're not doing the same exact thing, it's fine for you to practice your beliefs. That's my very simple premise on it. But we're going to go into three main things, which is the Kentucky clerk, the Supreme Court that was asked, and one thing that Joe Biden passed, or at least Joe Biden partially helped pass, since this was Congress.
Court ruled in favor of same-sex marriage across the United States. It could now be overturned. Senior.
Yeah, there's a few judges that Trump appointed since then, but the whole point that people are worried about is because of this. I'll say this. Wokeness has really, really badly hurt gay people. I'd say that's the biggest factor in this, which is the gay marriage was not a problem. The I want to be married, just leave me alone thing was never the problem. It was the people who took advantage of it to throw their beliefs onto everyone else forcibly. Like injecting it into whatever shows they want, doing it in every single thing they want. Not because the character was meant for that and that's what the character was made for, but basically injecting that into every source of media because they wanted they wanted to force representation in already established characters, whether it meant changing their race, gender, or even sexual identity, just because they felt like they had to implement their own right, just because instead of deciding to make their own characters with those beliefs, they took advantage of an already established fan base of that character and changed them just because they felt like that was the right choice. Oh, and a very big reason why too was a lot of pride events. Like there's a difference between, having an event, having fun, and that's it. But the problem with a lot of pride events was that there were children there, so you had to have a certain amount of respect for other people's children not seeing like things that children shouldn't be seeing. But in exchange, what they had was, people twerking on each other, people walking around pretty much naked, people like dressing up in like inappropriate things. Basically, that stuff where because children were forcibly injected into it, that's another huge problem that came with it. It would have never been a problem if this was an adults only thing. Like, that's the thing. It would have never been a problem if it was an adults only event that adults could go to, but because there are kids there, you have to have a certain extent of decency so that children are not exposed to such weird to things that would be inappropriate to them at that age. That's one of the really big ones, which is pride events have always been taken advantage of by weirdos in order to do weird things. And it wouldn't have been a big problem if those people were arrested and persecuted. So the events wouldn't be like this weird show of stuff. But because they never were, that's why so many people, when they look at that stuff, were disgusted seeing things like, we're going to take your kids, seeing all that stuff. But yeah, I'd say that's the part that everyone hates, which in turn made a lot of people extreme enough to actually want gay marriage repealed. So yeah, let's get into this.
Washington correspondent Devin Dwyer is on the story for us. All right, give us the deal, Devin. Who is actually asking the justices to overturn this?
Yep.
Well, in recent years, Kira, we've been waiting for a case like this as some of the sentiment in the country has started to shift a little bit, softened rather, against same-sex marriage. There's been a lot of talk about whether the justices would get a chance to reconsider the case. And as you said there, they are getting that opportunity next month. We've learned that Kim Davis, she's that Kentucky clerk from back in 2015 that was at the center of international controversy when she refused to issue marriage licenses to a gay couple in Kentucky in defiance of the.
Here's what I think, at least based off of her, which is it depends exactly what she was appointed to. Because when I hear Kentucky clerk, I'm thinking like, part of the government, like a government worker or a state worker. If she worked based off of that, then she would actually have no legal reason to discriminate and, set that against them. Like, if she worked for a religious institution or something else, then that would have been an expression of religious freedom where you don't have to go here, you can go somewhere else. But if she was state or government, then I'd say it's more so on her than really the gay couple. Because sadly, in the government, you're allowed to express religion, you're allowed to express your beliefs, you're allowed to marry whoever you want, because that's the government. But the government really shouldn't force religion into decisions they make. It's kind of like you're allowed to express what your beliefs are, but the government's supposed to be non-discriminatory across the board. That's supposed to be its job. I know there are people that obviously try to exploit that, but that's mainly its job to do that. So if she did reject it under the circumstances that she worked for the government, I'd say it's 100% her fault. I don't know whether jailing her was justified or not. That's the one thing I'm a bit iffy on, which is whether her being jailed was, actually justified or not. I don't know Kentucky law, so I can't tell you that part for sure.
Supreme Court, she spent 6 days in jail. She lost.
Oh, 6 days. Oh, okay. I mean, that's still 6 days in jail, but I guess that's not as bad as I thought.
Lost a defamation suit. She had to pay $100,000 in
Damn.
damages, $260,000 in legal fees. That's what she's appealing to the Supreme Court, but it's the first time, Kira, that anyone has technically asked the justices explicitly to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges, which was that landmark ruling. And she does just that. Her counsel in this petition, which was filed last week, says that decision was egregiously wrong. And if that sounds familiar, that's the same type of argument that was made by opponents of abortion when they sought to overturn Roe versus Wade just a few years ago. So a lot of eyes on this petition. It's unclear whether the court will take it up, but certainly a lot on the line.
I'll say this. Roe v. Wade versus, overturning same-sex marriage is completely different. Like, I get the sentiment that more liberal people would be in favor of both, but the reality is those two things are way too different to consider them very similar to each other. But anyways, for me, as I said, I agree with same-sex marriage. I agree that the government should give marriage licenses, and if there's religious institutions that don't accept it, that's fine. They can get it somewhere else, and that's pretty much it. Simple, basic, to the point.
Well, is there any indication that justices will consider hearing arguments?
A lot of the legal experts I've talked to say there's no chance the Supreme Court will want to wade into this. But, the climate that we're in right now, anything can happen. Certainly, we are in the midst of a campaign against same-sex marriages across the country. At least 9 states so far have either passed legislation seeking to end those rights or specifically asked the Supreme Court, send resolutions to the Supreme Court asking them to revisit. You saw the Southern Baptist Convention, the nation's largest Protestant Protestant Christian group just last
Mm-hmm.
month. They voted to make overturning Obergefell a top priority. So there's a renewed effort by activists in this space to try to get the attention of the Supreme Court. And a lot of them, Kira, are pointing to comments by Justice Clarence Thomas, the senior conservative, who after the Dobbs decision, the one that overturned abortion rights in this country, he said in his opinion that he thinks it's time to take a look again at marriage rights. So anything can happen. It's on the table, but most legal experts think that the chances are less likely than not, Kira.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be overturned, but there is something just in case it does that I'll talk about a little bit later. Anyways, just keep going. Here we go, Kim Davis, New York Post.
Kim Davis, the former Kentucky clerk who violated the rights of a couple when she refused to issue them a marriage license following the legalization of gay marriage in 2015, is now petitioning the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell v. Hodge altogether. In a filing last month, Davis asked SCOTUS to review the 2015 ruling, calling it a legal fiction. Matt Staver, the chairman of Liberty Counsel, a nonprofit that is representing Davis, said, Kim Davis's case underscores why the U.S. Supreme Court should overturn the wrongly decided Obergefell v. Hodges opinion because it threatens the religious liberty of Americans who believe that marriage is a sacred union between one man and one woman.
Yeah, and for that, that's the part that I said where religious institutions should be allowed to not accept gay marriage, but other places that do accept it should be allowed to exist at the same time. Because all forms of marriage should be, legally accepted by the government, no matter which institution it came from exactly. But freedom of religion cannot be squashed for gay marriage, but gay marriage can also not be squashed for freedom of religion. It's basically that, where both just have to exist knowing that the other one is there, but they can't do anything about it because both of them just have to live kind of like that. Because if you prioritize one over the other, the rights of one of them is going to be squandered for the rights of the other one, no matter which one it is. And that's the simple part.
But that's not what religious liberty is. The First Amendment does indeed protect the rights of Americans to exercise their religious beliefs without interference from the government. That is a sacred right that is fundamental to dignity and freedom.
Yep, 100% agree with this part, but let's see what she's going to say next. I feel like there's going to be a huge but.
But religious liberty does not require that you personally agree with every law that your government passes.
To be honest, I actually do agree with that. Just as long as the government doesn't force religious institutions to do it, it should be allowed in other institutions that are completely okay with it.
Religious liberty certainly doesn't mean that any one religion or church will get to decide what rights other people in this country are granted. That would be the opposite of liberty. That would be state-mandated religion. And
I actually do agree with that point. I thought she was gonna go in another direction that I was gonna be annoyed by, but she actually handled that pretty well. So never mind.
while some people may be of the opinion that their own personal religious beliefs should be enshrined into law, most Americans would probably take issue if someone else's religion were enforced by the government, which is exactly why the First Amendment explicitly prohibits the government from establishing a religion. Staver went on to say that the First Amendment precludes making the choice between your faith and your livelihood. But that just isn't true. The First Amendment protects the expression of your faith. It does not guarantee you a job. And no faith system requires you to be employed as a county clerk. Davis could have resigned or allowed her deputy to issue marriage licenses in her stead.
Yeah, that's the thing that I said too. Okay, this lady actually making some good points. This lady's actually making some really good points. Yeah, but that's like the same thing I said, which is if she's a government worker, she has to accept it or let someone else sign it in her place. That literally should have been the end of it, but refusing it all right together was the main reason why it was a big problem.
Which would have allowed her to continue adhering to her beliefs while also not violating the rights of someone else. She did not. In Obergefell, the Supreme Court ruled that the ability to marry is a constitutionally protected right that applies to same-sex couples. This does not prevent anyone from holding their own opinions about marriage. It simply prohibits the government from preventing couples from marrying based on their sex. In her filing, Davis may think that she's fighting on behalf of liberty, but what she's actually fighting for is more government interference and less freedom for everyone.
Yep. She's fighting for a certain religion to be prioritized in the government as a way to throw her beliefs as a giant hammer to hit people. But yeah, there's always gonna be extreme people on pretty much every side. That's a taken. Like, you just have to accept that actually does exist. And this issue is, this one's a very hard one to get on the exact right spot on, because you have to basically be a libertarian on this. Like, there's no other really real decision that allows the two to live without one squandering the rights of the other. This part was done during Joe Biden's term, but here it is. Specifically between the act that replaces provisions that define, for the purposes of federal law, marriage as between a man and a woman, and spouse as a same person of the opposite sex, with provisions that recognize any marriage between two individuals is valid under state law. The Supreme Court held that the current provisions were unconstitutional to the United States v. Windsor in 2013. The act also replaces provisions that do not require states to recognize same-sex marriages from the other states, with provisions that prohibit the denial of full faith and credit or any right or claim related to out-of-state marriages on the basis of same-sex, race, ethnicity, or national origin. The Supreme Court held that the state law barring same-sex marriages were unconstitutional in Obergefell v. Hodge in 2015. The court held that the state law barring interracial marriages were unconstitutional in Loving v. Virginia, 1967. The act allows the Department of Justice to bring civil actions and establishes the private right of actions for violations. The Act 1, affecting religious liberties or conscience protections that are available under the Constitution or federal law. 2, requires the religious organizations to provide goods and services to formally recognize or celebrate a marriage. 3, affects any benefits or rights that do not arise from marriage. Or 4, recognize under federal law that any marriage between more than two individuals. This act does not affect religious liberties or conscience protections that are available under the Constitution of federal law. This is a W for religious organizations. So reality, they should not have a big beef with this. 2, requires religious organizations to provide goods or services to formally recognize or celebrate a marriage. 100% agree. 3, affect any beliefs or rights that do not arise from a marriage, or recognize under federal law any marriage between more than two individuals. So this is actually pretty good. So this was overall an actually very good bill passed. So there you go. You don't affect religious institutions at all by enforcing marriages they don't accept on them. And at the very same time, gay people are allowed to get married. And this is what I think. Any state or government, like office related to any of that stuff, cannot discriminate on, religion, cannot discriminate based on religion or any ideals, because it's the government. No discrimination. Just allow whoever they want to come in and marry. Religious institutions can, continue being religious. And that's that. Simple.